So, tonight we are going to be chatting about In Cold Blood. Well, the actual murder that inspired that book. It was the Clutter family murders that happened in Holcomb, Kansas. And I would just like to kind of read an article about it. And then if you guys want, you can ask me questions about it, or we can just talk about it. So, let's go. Alright. In the early morning hours of November 15th, 1959, 4 members of the Clutter family, Herb, his wife Bonnie, and their teenage children, Nancy and Kenyon, were murdered in the small farming community of Holcomb, Kansas. 2 ex-convicts, Perry Smith and Richard Hickok, were found guilty of the murders. Both Smith and Hickok were executed by the state of Kansas on the same day, April 14, 1965. The murders were detailed by Truman Capote in his 1966 nonfiction novel, In Cold Blood. If you guys haven't read that book, you have to. It is such a good book, and Truman Capote is an awesome author. But anyways, back to the article. Herb Clutter was a prosperous farmer in western Kansas. His 2 elder daughters, Ivana and Beverly, had moved out and started their adult lives. His 2 younger children, Nancy, age 16, and Kenyon, age 15, were high school students. Clutter's wife, Bonnie, had reportedly been incapacitated by clinical depression and physical ailments since the birth of her children, although this was later disputed. Richard Dick Hickok and Perry Smith were 2 ex-convicts, recently paroled from the Kansas State Penitentiary. Floyd Wells, a former cellmate of Hickok's, had been a farmhand for Herb Clutter. Wells told Hickok that Clutter kept large amounts of cash in a safe. However, Clutter did not have a safe and transacted all his business by check. After speaking with Wells, Hickok soon hatched the idea to steal the safe and start a new life in Mexico. Hickok later contacted Smith, another former cellmate, about committing the robbery with him. According to Truman Capote, the author of In Cold Blood, a non-fiction novel detailing the Clutter family murders, Hickok described his plan as a cinch, the perfect score. On the evening of November 14th, 1959, Hickok and Smith drove more than 400 miles across the state of Kansas, heading for the Clutter residence. In order to execute their plan, in the early morning hours of November 15th, the pair arrived in Holcomb, located the Clutter home, and entered through an unlocked door while the family slept. That's one thing that was bad about the Clutter family, is the town this happened in, it was extremely, everybody knew each other. And so they had trust for, their neighbors and their friends. And so they left their door unlocked. And that was their demise. Anyways, upon rousing the Clutters and discovering that there was no safe, they bound and gagged the family and continued to search for money, but found little of value in the house. Determined to leave no witnesses, the pair briefly debated what to do. Smith, notoriously unstable and prone to violent acts and fits of rage, slit Herb Clutter's throat and then shot him in the head. Smith later recounted, "I didn't want to harm the man. I thought he was a very nice gentleman. Soft-spoken. I thought so right up to the moment I cut his throat." Kenyon, Nancy, and lastly, Bonnie Clutter were also murdered, each by a single shotgun blast to the head. During their commission of the crime, Smith prevented Hickok from raping Nancy. Hickok and Smith left the crime scene with a small portable radio belonging to Kenyon Clutter, a pair of binoculars belonging to Herbert Clutter, and less than $500 in cash, believed to have been the change from a $60 check Herbert Clutter had recently cashed. Herbert Clutter was well known locally as a businessman who preferred paying by check and never carried or kept significant amounts of cash. His billfold was scattered. Non-cash items were found in his first-floor bedroom. Smith later claimed in his oral confession that Hickok murdered the two women. When asked to sign his confession, however, Smith refused. According to Capote's In Cold Blood, Smith wanted to accept responsibility for all 4 killings because he said he was sorry for Dick's mother. Smith added, "She's a real sweet person." Hickok always maintained that Smith had murdered all 4 victims. The victims: Herbert William Herb Clutter, born May 24th, 1911, died November 15th, 1959, age 48. Bonnie May Fox Clutter, born January 7th, 1914, died November 15th, 1959, age 45, his wife. Nancy May Clutter, born January 2nd, 1943, died November 15th, 1959, was the 16-year-old daughter of Herb and Bonnie Clutter. She was the youngest of the Clutter's 3 daughters. As a student, Nancy earned high grades. She attended church regularly and was involved in 4-H. Her interests included horse riding, baking, and helping younger children. On the night of the murders, Nancy was bound with rope and killed in her bed. She received a shotgun blast to her head. It is disputed as to whether she was murdered by Smith or Hickok. Kenyon Neal Clutter, born August 28th, 1944, died November 15th, 1959, age 15, was the youngest child of 4 and the only son of Herb and Bonnie Clutter. Authorities found Kenyon on a couch. He had been bound, gagged, and shot in the head. Kenyon had been killed by Perry Smith. The 4 victims are buried at Valley View Cemetery in Garden City, Kansas. The perpetrators: Perry Edward Smith, born October 27th, 1928, died April 14th, 1965, age 31 at the time of the murders, age 36 at execution. Richard Eugene Dick Hickok, born June 6th, 1931, died April 14th, 1965, age 28 at the time of the murders, age 33 at execution. And the book about, there's books about this murder. The book is called In Cold Blood. And this little article says, before the killers were captured, author Truman Capote learned of the Clutter family murders and decided to travel to Kansas and write about the crime. He was accompanied by his childhood friend and fellow author, Herbert. Together, they interviewed local residents and investigators assigned to the case and took thousands of pages of notes. The killers, Hickok and Smith, were arrested 6 weeks after the murders and were eventually executed by the state of Kansas in 1965. Capote ultimately spent 6 years working on his book. When finally published in 1966, In Cold Blood was an instant success. Today, it is the second best-selling true crime book in publishing history, behind Vincent Puglisi's 1974 book, Helter Skelter, about the Charles Manson murders. That's another one I want to do. And then there's movies, TV shows about it. There's a movie called In Cold Blood that was made in 1967. Robert Blake, who bore an uncanny resemblance to Perry Smith, portrayed Smith. Scott Wilson portrayed Hickok. And then there's a TV miniseries that was made in 1996. Eric Roberts portrayed Smith, and Anthony Edwards portrayed Hickok. Capote, which is a 2005 movie, Clifton Collins Jr. portrayed Smith. Mark Pellegrino portrayed Hickok, and Philip Seymour Hoffman portrayed Truman Capote. And then, last but not least, Infamous, a 2006 film. Daniel Craig portrayed Smith, Lee Pace portrayed Hickok, and Toby Jones portrayed Capote. And that's really all we've got. I heard about this book. Like, I had to do this book for a school assignment in high school, and I loved this book. I don't know if it was because it had taken place in the, state I was born in and I live in, or if, I don't know why, but this has always been one of my favorite little I don't know. details about the murder and the victims. Also, the murders. Anyways, here we go. So, Herb Clutter's throat was slashed, and the killer listened to his victim gurgling into death. Hickok confessed to hearing a gurgling noise when Smith slashed Mr. Clutter's throat before shooting him in the head. He cut the hell out of him, Hickok told police. Don Colvin was an army buddy of Smith's who visited him in prison. He said, "As I pulled the trigger, there was a flash of blue light. I could see his head split apart. A shotgun, a knife, some rope, and some tape is all that was needed to kill the Clutter family." The murders all took place in different rooms, so everybody died alone. Herb Clutter was killed in the basement, Nancy in her bedroom, Kenyon was tied to a piece of furniture, and Bonnie in her bedroom upstairs. They weren't found until the next morning. Mr. Clutter was splayed across a blood-soaked mattress in the basement. Tape covered his mouth. A shotgun blast undid his head. A slash exposed the innards of his throat. In the next room was 15-year-old Kenyon, who was tied and bound to a piece of furniture. A head split via shotgun lolled upon his shoulders. Mrs. Clutter was bound, gagged, and dead of a shotgun blast to the head also. Nancy was only bound, not gagged, meaning she most likely begged for her life freely, but was given the same treatment as the rest of the family: death by a shotgun blast to the face. Perry Smith and Richard Hickok ended up with no more than $50, a pair of binoculars, and a transistor radio. It turns out that there was no safe full of money, like they'd been told by a fellow inmate while the pair were in jail. The footprint next to Mr. Clutter is what brought justice to the Clutter family deaths. The verdict: death by hanging. If you guys haven't read that movie is an awesome, shit.